So you're the person who bought Grandpa Ibu's house from the bank after the foreclosure?
Yes, Niboo. It was extremely unfortunate that your grandfather lost his house when he lost his job as a greeter at the Gigantomart.
He is still waiting for a hip replacement. It might be another 6 months. In the meantime, he is living in a tent in Gatineau Park.
I suppose the fresh air will be good for him. But that is what life is going to be like under a Harper majority government, Niboo. The rich will get richer and the low-income earners, elderly and disadvantaged, will fall by the wayside. Social Darwinism and all that, don't you know?
What do you mean, Mrs. Taboo?
Well, Niboo, the Conservatives have been throwing money at the Canadian electorate like drunken wedding guests throwing confetti at the bride and groom. They have been promising the middle-class voter tax credits and incentives, such as a doubling of the TFSA contribution, as if they have money to burn. And where do you think the money is going to come from to pay for all of these promises? Why, social programs will have to be cut. And the low-income earners, elderly and disadvantaged, will be the first to feel the cuts.
Well, perhaps the poor, elderly and disadvantaged aren't living in key ridings, Mrs. Taboo. Perhaps they are not a large enough voting bloc to matter that much.
That's very cynical of you to say that, Niboo. But I am afraid you may be right.
So what are we all going to do if there is a Conservative majority, Mrs. Taboo?
The first thing to do is to try and prevent a Conservative majority, Niboo. Advance polls are open during the Easter weekend. And for you Liberal or Bloc voters, if it means voting NDP to prevent a Conservative from winning in your riding, then by all means vote NDP. And the same is true for you NDP voters. If voting Liberal means that you will prevent a Conservative from winning, then vote Liberal. The stakes are too high for party loyalty at this point.
Surely you exaggerate, Mrs. Taboo. Perhaps a Conservative majority won't be that bad.
I assure you, Niboo, it will be that bad, and even worse than you can imagine. If the Conservatives win a majority, you can expect that the long gun registry will be scrapped. Federal funding for abortion or sex education. Watch out. Federal funding for political parties? Goodbye. Environmental programs and adherence to the Kyoto Accord? You must be joking. They will be as extinct as the polar bear will soon be. No, Niboo, Canada will become a very unwelcoming place for many of us.
Including cartoon bears such as ourselves, Mrs. Taboo.
Yes, Niboo, even cartoon bears will suffer. Remember that the Harper government cut $45 million from federal funding of arts programs prior to the 2008 election. So the Conservatives are no friends of the arts, including cartoon bears such as ourselves.
So what are we to do, Mrs. Taboo?
Do you remember the 2000 election, when George Bush was elected president? Many Americans said that they were going to move to Canada. Well, if Stephen Harper wins a majority, watch for Canadians to start moving to more democratic societies, like the United States or France.
It's a good thing that you're teaching us French in 2nd grade, Mrs. Taboo.
Oui, c'est une chose très bonne, Niboo.
Bonjour à tous.
Au revoir, Canadiens.